Welcome to Physioplata. I'm your host, Rod Henderson. I'm here with Patrick Damra, and we are two grappling physiotherapists. And we put this podcast together to help you stay healthy and on the mats. So we're back at it. Patrick's good to see you again, man.
Good to see you too. Good to see you too.
Yeah. So anything new happening in your world?
Well, let's talk about the new in your world first. Nice little purple belt.
Yeah, man, that was pretty cool. So for me, this week, a couple days ago, I was pretty fortunate, and our head coach Jeremy Fields from 10th Planet Corona came down to New Caney, did a seminar, and hooked a bunch of us up with our promotions, and I was very, very fortunate to get my purple belt. And so, man, that felt really good. It felt good. It was fun. It was kind of a surreal experience, you know, how it feels, you know, when you get your belt. It was just something that it was great. The white belt, you go through the white belt, you go through the blue belt, and that was, I thought getting my blue belt was great, but then all the learning that takes place after blue, you don't realize how much you still don't know. And even now, I'm humbled by how much I have yet to learn in the sport, but it felt great.
Yeah. For me, the blue belt promotions were pretty important. Like, as a white belt, that where you're starting to be competitive and not just doing competitions, but you know you're doing well against upper belts.
Yeah.
And then when you're in that transition phase where you're pretty much better than most white belts, and you're doing good against most blue belts. That's that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And then you get promoted, and then it hits you again as to how little you actually know, and you get, you know, put back into the meat grinder again.
Yeah.
So to say. You really start over again, like, right? It's not just like, I mean, you definitely have your foundational knowledge and skills, but it starts over every time you get promoted, it seems like. And blue belt, that's where I'm at right now. So still lots to learn. There's just so much that you can really sample from when it comes to techniques, you know, different positions. And so that's where I'm at right now. I'm just kind of still sampling, still figuring out what works best for me. And I think it's pretty cool that you got your purple belt. And especially, you know, you guys at 10th Planet, you guys do things in a different way, to so to say. Quite a few different things going on over there. So you guys are not really all that into belts, right? Because you guys do nogi all the time, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, I think that's a little bit of a misconception about 10th Planet, just a little bit, because okay. I mean, we don't wear the gi, right? So we don't wear belts and no gi, but the gi, the belts they're symbolic, just like they're symbolic for the gi, and they're just kind of a milestone, a little touch point. So yeah, I mean, we don't wear the belts. But
you should definitely wear your belt.
You
should definitely.
Yeah.
Don't wear it to work. I mean, what we're doing here.
Yeah, I almost put it on this morning. Man, it just it's symbolic, but it it's a good acknowledgement from your coaches and your teammates, and it felt really great to see my other teammates get their, a couple of my other teammates got their purple belts, and then a bunch of guys got their blues. So it's just a really good, just a good vibe, for the whole group, and being able to stay on the mats through the blue belt. I was determined not to have any kind of lag time once I got my blue belt. That's one of the things I said I wasn't going to get blue flu, and so I wanted to stay on the mats. So I wanted to keep myself healthy. I mostly did that. I got one pretty big injury a couple of months ago, but do
you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that.
Because I think, when we're talking about the highs of how it is with training, being promoted, winning, or doing great in training or whatever, we should probably also touch on, the struggles along the way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think injuries are probably the number one reason people tend to drop out. And then as you get into your blue belt, you're getting more rounds, so you're getting more opportunities to get injured as well. So we'll talk a bit about that. But I think sometimes things are just kind of fluky. I'm convinced that most of the injuries that I've ever encountered as a white or a blue belt have been mostly from my own, either not tapping soon enough or making a mistake in terms of where I put my foot. Rarely have I ever been injured by a training partner. and most of the time it's been me that's injured myself. And this shoulder injury that I had a couple 2.5 months ago was a great example of that. I was in a shoulder crunch, you know, my partner had the overhook on my shoulder, and he was working a sweep, and I thought, you know, I really don't want to get swept, even though he was a much better, you know, he's the guy I was rolling with is higher level than I am. He had a nice solid clamp on my shoulder. There was no way I was getting out of it, but I tried to force against it instead of going with it, and I really, really tried to limp arm through and just really, it was a nasty little
Trying to
dislocation.
do something last minute to get out of a bad situation.
Exactly. And, you know, we talked about this last time. The longer you wait to do something about something, you have to do something pretty extraordinary to get out of it. A late escape is always harder than an early escape. And same thing with the sweep, man. And I just made a mistake and paid for it. So I definitely learned. But fortunately, I've been able to rehabilitate the shoulder, and it's gotten better. So, yeah, I think one day we should probably talk about shoulder rehab and
that's what we're kind of doing, right? We're not like talking about things from a jiu-jitsu perspective per se, because we're like still going through it, right? We don't have all those experiences and all those miles on us to be able to talk about that as well. But we are talking more about from a physical therapy perspective. How are we navigating these things? How are we experiencing these things? And then we're trying to make that applicable to all of you guys watching, to all of you guys who have questions about, you know, how you should, or maybe just some people who have the same experiences and they're like wondering, like, you know, what to now expect from that and how to work through that, or what, you know, a general sense of plan of action should be. So that's what we're trying to do here. So I think it's good that you're talking about, you know, obviously a great thing, getting your purple belt, but then not too long before having a pretty significant injury, but being able to modify things. You know, I know you talked about, to me personally, how you were adjusting your training and how, you know, you picked certain training partners, positions, etc. So we'll talk about all that stuff a little bit more in different parts of different podcasts.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great like contrast, right? So you've got the accomplishment, but you definitely had some issues along the way.
Yeah, and I don't think you get like I don't think you get to your blue belt, like, you know, when you first get to your blue belt, you've seen a few things, right? It's miserable. You go through that first 6 months where you're just getting smashed constantly, and so you're willing to suffer through all that to get to your blue belt, and that's a very impressive thing. And then, you know, blue belt, I think you accumulate some more of those experiences, and you know, my jiu-jitsu is still, I feel like my jiu-jitsu is still in the early stages of getting better. It's obviously it's a purple belt, so it's meaningful, but I still feel like I have so much to learn. But managing those times when it's really, really tough or you get injured, I think that's what causes people to quit. And I think that's what's the real tragedy of jiu-jitsu is people will they'll have a rib injury. Right now I've got a friend that I graduated from high school with, so he's in his 50s, he's just starting.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, he got his first stripe like a couple days ago. What's up, Tommy?
Stripe and no-gi as well?
Gi. He trains. He's getting his gi, so he trains. Yeah. So he got a little stripe on his belt, and you know how meaningful that is. It always feels great.
The first stripe is like you blasted all over social media type of important.
Dude, it's a huge thing, right? You know, it's a first acknowledgement. I mean, and it's you know, it's a big deal. So, but he's dealing with a rib thing, and you know, we're talking a little bit about that, and then you hear about guys that tear their ACL. There's a notable one that we'll talk about here in a little bit. The issue on B Team. We'll talk about that B Team video, and I mean, just stuff comes up, and I see that you see this in running, right? It's like, oh, well, I don't run because it hurts my knees, and so they don't run. They don't do any kind of cardiovascular exercise, and people quit jiu-jitsu because they get a hurt rib. Then they don't realize there's all kinds of modifications that you can make to your training. You can train with smaller partners. You can practice, working your top game. There's all kinds of modifications you can make to keep. If you love jiu-jitsu and you want to stay in jiu-jitsu, an injury should not keep you out of jiu-jitsu.
And I think that's a great point that you just put up with the running. I mean, we're obviously going to focus on jiu-jitsu on the main, part of this podcast. But it comes to other sports just as much, like the running, the swimming, the weightlifting, which is crucial. And all those other things are supplemental training tools for jiu-jitsu sometimes also, right? So being able to stay, somewhat or reduce your risk of injury, during those other activities, especially also with jiu-jitsu, is just going to help you all around to be more healthy and also, help your jiu-jitsu game or your conditioning for that to set the stage, right? It's going to help all that quite a bit more.
For sure.
Very versatile stuff. Everything is tied in together. That's that jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Yeah, and the better you make those connections, the better your jiu-jitsu is usually. At least it seems that way.
For sure.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and so get to start this kind of new part of the journey. And one of the things I'm really trying to stay committed to is, I think over the last few years, one of the things that slipped a little bit has been my conditioning outside of jiu-jitsu. I got so into jiu-jitsu, man.
That is such a common thing. I've heard that from, I've talked to some black belts that have done it for a long time, competed on a high stage or very important competitions. And it's the same thing with them that they're saying. It's like some people, especially in that blue to purple belt range, since you are getting really committed into it and you get that reward of being promoted, or you had great experiences by competing and winning and whatnot, you get so into that world that you are neglecting parts that support that game that you might have or the jiu-jitsu training that you're doing. And it's not just about recovery, but it's also about what you're doing when you're training jiu-jitsu, just because overused movements or stress risers, all those things become, quite a big deal when you're diving that deep into jiu-jitsu and you let everything else kind of fall by the wayside. So that's a great point you bring up. I mean, we can also talk about how important, weight training is to support those kind of factors. And obviously flexibility is an important thing when you're doing jiu-jitsu, because it's kind of helpful to have it, right? Because you have so many more techniques that you might have available to you, or you can sneak out of some submissions, some arm bars, which that can get you in trouble sometimes if you're flexible, right? If you're relying on that. But it's kind of you have to hit it right in the middle. You kind of have to be very well rounded and touch on all those little components that supplement and allow you to train for as long as possible. That's the idea.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, navigating that, I think maybe as you go and you get through your blue belt and maybe into your purple belt, hopefully you get smarter with your training. You get smarter with the techniques that you use, of course, but then obviously you get a little smarter with making sure that, hey, if I'm screwed, with this arm bar, maybe not trying to just totally, muscle through it and fight through it. You just tap. Your ego gets a little bit dinged there. But hey, man, that's part of jiu-jitsu, and I've definitely learned to be a little bit more comfortable tapping. My ego takes a little hit. I'm rolling with this white belt. Maybe he's really athletic, and maybe he gets the arm stretched out there. And
I've been fortunate to travel, a little bit more and train. And the nice thing is, honestly, wherever you go nowadays, anywhere you travel, there's a jiu-jitsu place.
Right.
Which is super cool, man. I mean, you meet just all kinds of really cool people, and some of the things that from your gym, you will experience them somewhere totally different, and then some things you'll see that are totally new, right? Just because they're maybe they have a different focus. You guys have a heavy focus on nogi and leg locks and whatnot. So whatever gym you might go to, you might find that way. And so because I've been traveling a lot, I don't have any problems tapping when I'm in trouble. Yes, I'm trying to, find little different ways how I can maybe wiggle myself out of some really bad positions, but I have no problem tapping. And I think that's a great point that you bring up, because if you're doing jiu-jitsu and you want to keep doing it for a long time, you should not be a meathead trying to survive everything as long as possible. Because I've been there too, so I'm saying it with love.
Yeah.
But it's just not the way to do it. It's just the longevity is not there for you, especially if you think about joint injuries, muscle injuries, all that stuff. So tapping is good, especially if you want to learn more and train for longer.
I'm a big proponent of tapping. I've tap a lot, but now I feel like I'm getting as many as I'm having to tap, and of course when I roll with my more experienced guys, I tap a lot more. If I roll with a really, really competitive, aggressive blue belt, they're wearing me out, So it's like, when I roll with you, I mean, you've got good, athleticism and flexibility. So it's like, it's all that stuff, that
The backhanded,
no, that's not a
compliment.
backhanded compliment.
It is.
That's a straight compliment. You're young, you're long, So it's kind of like I still get the you're really strong. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, how do you mean it? So, but yeah.
And strength is good. You should, if you have strength, you should definitely use it.
I am using my strength.
I'm telling you,
zero.
I've heard that
Yeah.
many times before also, and yes, I was definitely a spazzy white belt, so I definitely deserved it, man, but I'm telling you, if you have strength, you got to use it. I've been told that by black belts before, so I don't feel bad about it. And I think, if you're training that way, you're training true to your biomechanics, right?
Yeah.
And your skill set. So no, it won't be there forever, that strength, right? But it'll help you to learn during this phase as you're becoming more efficient. So that, in that sense, to me, that means less stress on your body. Obviously, by all means, you can't go, full body slamming on some people, which because you're stronger than them. But for your own, techniques, if you use some strength, I think that's fine. I mean, obviously, don't hurt your training partners. That's not what we're talking about, but be true to what tools you have available to you.
Well, look at it this way. Nobody ever tells somebody who's really flexible to not express all their
Exactly.
flexibility during guard retention, So it's like,
I will.
Yeah, well, but I mean,
If I see
strength.
something funky.
Yeah. Strength is one of the only assets or attributes that I've seen that people will go, oh well, if you're using too much of that, no one ever says it about your cardio or your flexibility, But yeah, as an older grappler who's got strength that is usually an advantage, I'm using my
Absolutely.
strength.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
Okay. All right, guys. So that was it for that episode. Basically, big news we were talking about is a new purple belt is around, so you better watch out. And yeah, so some general tips or insights from us, going through this little jiu-jitsu journey, training, on and off the mats. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and more to come as always. So tune in for the next one.